Thanks for having me, everybody. It's so lovely to be back and see you and especially experience the worship, which I haven't for a few months now. It's been 6 months, and I've come back to tell you what's been happening in our family and share our story with our new baby. This is Eve. She came out looking like a butterfly, and she had a really tricky start to life, actually. We spent 2 months on the butterfly ward, which is the newborn intensive care at the Royal Children's Hospital, and she continues to experience quite significant health problems, and so we call her the medically complex warrior. And in warrior-like fashion, I think I've called this, talk battle ready, because it sounds hardcore, and we are hardcore now, just like her. And so I'm going to refer to my story of having a baby as a battle, but I don't want you to think she's the battle. She's just complicated. And the battle is actually knowing how to walk this journey with her as a happy family and in community and stay in relationship with God. And so that journey at the moment is a real battle for us. You guys don't have babies, except for the fluffy four-legged kind. So it might be tricky to relate to my circumstance. So what I want you to do is to think of a time in your life when you have experienced something that's so much bigger than you. You might call it a God-sized battle. I know you've got exams right now and there might be a lot of stress and anxiety, so it might be that. It's a type of battle that is huge in comparison to anything else in your life. It calls things out of you that you didn't expect. It takes all of your focus and it changes you. And so our story with Eve started in a really scary way. When she took her first breath, both of her lungs simultaneously collapsed and she needed oxygen straight away. And so I held her for about a minute and she was taken to the edge of the room and then out into the emergency room, and I just expected her to come back, but she didn't. And when I went to find her and I saw her properly for the first time, I was in awe of this perfectly beautiful formed tiny baby, but really overwhelmed as well, because she looked like this. She had a heap of overwhelming cords. She had a tube down her throat, which was giving her oxygen, and you would kind of expect in an emergency room at this point for it to be really noisy and beeping and rushing, and you see all the scenes on Grey's Anatomy and it's like chaos, because she was in big trouble. She wasn't responding to anything at that point, and she'd already been poked and prodded in the first few months of her life, had a chest drain, and it was a very seemingly chaotic scene. But what I can remember is that there was no sense of panic in the room, which was really bizarre. The medical staff knew what they were doing. They were very calm and controlled. They were moving quickly. Everybody seemed to have a job. They brought me in and called me Mum for the first time. And it was a really surreal moment that I can only look back and think that God's presence was in that room in a very tangible way, and his hand was holding Eve and over Eve from her very first breath. And so that, it was totally this: be still and know that I am God, that we experienced right from the beginning. And so this feeling continued when we were transferred to the Royal Children's Hospital with a setup like this, and I've got a little video. We'll see if it works. And this video is her first 2 to 3 weeks of her life. Really quiet. You can kind of hear. So what you're hearing right now is much louder than that. It's Eve attached to a ventilator, which was giving her 500 tiny shallow breaths a minute so that it wouldn't damage her lungs. And at that point, it was hour by hour, which means in hospital terms, we don't predict what's going to happen within the next hour. So we are watching 24/7. And we knew at that point that Eve's lungs weren't able to absorb and transfer oxygen around her body in the way that ours would. And it was also putting a lot of pressure on her heart. And so for the first 3 to 4 weeks, she really didn't feel like our baby. Everybody else knew how to talk about her, how to care for her, how to hold her. We weren't able to sleep in the same room or feed her. We had to ask if we wanted to touch her. And so there were so many things about this battle that were completely foreign, and we felt completely unprepared. And so some of the usual things that I would turn to that make me feel prepared are these. Knowledge for one. Reading about things beforehand, talking about them, asking questions. This is exactly what you guys have been doing. It's called studying. Time makes me feel prepared. If I've got lots of time beforehand to sit and ponder and think about it. Having seen it done before or having a history of experiencing it, that makes me feel prepared, and just being generally organised. And these are really smart things that we teach you guys to do in school, because they help us feel certain, and we love feeling certain. I know I spend probably a lot of time in my life being hung up on the need to feel certain before I actually do anything, and I love feeling prepared, and I've therefore become particularly good at Googling stuff and YouTubing things, and I really don't think anything can't be solved with YouTube like this is what we will be doing tomorrow. Because we love that movie Trolls, and so we'll be making a baby troll wig. But what I have come to realise is that our human idea of certainty and our human need for preparation, it doesn't even factor into the equation when we're faced with God-sized battles. Like, it doesn't even count. And I guess I'm comforted by the fact that the Bible's actually filled with so many people and so many stories of people who are completely unequipped, they're unprepared, they're unknowing, totally insecure, yet God has specifically anointed them and chosen them to fulfill His promise. And I wonder why that is. And I really think God doesn't care about our need for preparation or certainty, because if He did, what would the point of leaning on Him be? And He is actually far more interested in the posture of our heart. And what I mean by that, for me, is our ability to trust. And it's summarized really nicely in this verse from Samuel that goes like this. The Lord does not look at things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so, in a way, I'm kind of grateful that God looked at my heart, because He must have thought that me and Sean are the best people to face this battle with Eve, on behalf of Eve. And it's actually a privilege to be chosen as her mum and dad to walk this journey with her, because God could have chosen anybody. And I'm really, really grateful that He chose us. Sean and I have read all the research, all the medical papers, all the journal articles on what Eve has, and it's really easy, because there are only 2 worldwide published on Eve's condition. And so she has a couple of things going wrong. One is this term called interstitial lung disease, and that's a broad spectrum term given to many, many, many different things that affect the lining of the lung, and that's tricky to know which of those things apply to her. And the other thing is this pulmonary hypertension, which means that her heart is beating far harder, or working, far harder than it has to. And we wonder why. And in hospital, if we can find out why, then we can obviously treat it. And we don't know why. We have an educated guess that it is because of a gene mutation. And so we're assuming that's the case, but it makes it really tricky to predict her outcomes, and it makes it impossible to know if we treat it this way, she'll respond in that manner. And so from the research that we've read about Eve, or conditions similar to Eve from those 2 papers, which include 21 different cases, we know that some kids grow out of this, which is what we want. We know that most of them don't survive this. We know that a lot of them stay on oxygen or medication, or some grow old enough to be 4 years old and receive a lung or a heart and lung transplant. And so the place that we sit with her is incredibly unknown. And it's also the place that you will sit when you're in the middle of a battle before you get to a solution. And it calls us to do this. We must live by faith and not by sight. This is what it's calling us to do. And so I remember a comment from a doctor who was there the night that Eve was admitted, and then he went away for 3 weeks and returned. And when he returned, he said, "Oh, this is the baby I didn't expect to see." And the other doctor in the room must have seen my look of shock, because she said, "Georgie, at what point did you know your baby was dying?" And I said, "I didn't know she was dying." And so call it naivety, call it denial, but something, we felt like God was protecting us in those, especially in those first really fragile few weeks of her life, because for some reason, like, unless someone must have said it, but we didn't get that memo, and we had this belief that clearly was not of us, considering how much danger she was in. We had this belief that she would be okay, even though nobody else was saying that. And so we, just by default, and through God's Spirit, we lived like this, and we continue to live by faith and not by sight. We have encountered a lot of generosity throughout this journey, which has been amazing. When we are at the Royal Children's Hospital, we stay across the road at the Ronald McDonald House, which for one thing is a charity, and it's amazing and it's free. And we meet lots of families there. And there was this one family that was really pivotal in our experience. I was on the stairs one day getting ready to come see Eve, and a gentleman walked out of his room, and he looked like he had a rough night. He clearly slept in his clothes, he looked exhausted, he'd been crying, and he said, "Oh, this is going to be a hard day." It was just the biggest, heaviest sigh. And he continued to tell me a story. He said, "My baby girl died yesterday. She was 11 weeks old, and he told me that they were farmers from South Australia, and today they had to fly home and plan her funeral. And in the midst of his devastation, he actually asked about Eve. And so Eve was 3 weeks old at that point, and he said, "Do you have any baby supplies?" And we didn't, because we hadn't been home. And he went back to his room, and he came out holding 2 massive bags and gave them to me. And he said, "I want you to have these things. We don't need them anymore. We want you to have them." And they were bags full of nappies, of baby wipes, of nappy cream, and he just gave them to me. And what's crazy is the next moment, the mum, or his wife, came out with 2 other big bags, and she said, "Please, will you take my baby girl's clothes? Our baby can't wear them anymore. I want Eve to wear them." And it was clearly a massive mix of emotions, but we just stood there crying for a long time, embracing. I'd tell them I would never forget them, never forget their baby, and I would share their story, and it's pretty crazy that I'm up here telling you about it now. And I said, "Thank you so much." And they walked away, and as the dad walked away, he said, "Oh, I feel better about today already." Just incredible. And what I think it's just the most perfect reflection. This is actually all the clothes that they gave us. And it is just mirrors this story, I think, perfectly. It's called The Widow at the Treasury from Mark, and it goes like this. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and observed how the crowd put money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow also came and put in 2 small coins worth a few cents. Calling his disciples to himself, he said to them, Amen, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the other contributors to the treasury, for they have all contributed from their surplus wealth. But she, from her poverty, has contributed all she had, her whole livelihood. And so meeting these people was a massive God moment, as you can imagine, because those parents lost everything, yet they gave what little they had left of their little girl to Eve. And by doing that, they were making the assumption that she would grow up and leave hospital and wear them. And at that point, we actually didn't know if that was going to happen. And so from that moment on, I tried to be really generous and make a conscious effort to be aware of other people and put myself in their shoes. It's a really, really important thing to be able to do. And it's really hard to do when your life is hard. It's really hard to do when you don't know and can't see your way out, but you must. And smiling is free, being nice is free, showing love is free, and you don't know how amazing it is to receive that, and then the gift, obviously, of doing that, because that gentleman said, I feel better about what is an awful day already. Okay, so this is Eve. She smiles. She's actually got an IV on her hand right now, doing in this photo, and she's flapping. And in hospital, she flaps and flicks out her IVs all the time, which makes it very tricky. But she's such a beautiful little gift to be smiling amidst all this. And this is, I just put that in this morning because we made it. It's a little rainbow that she had painted, and it says, I can put the I in kind, which you should. And so we left hospital the first time after 8 weeks, and we made a pink graduation hat from the NICU, and it was fabulous. And she was on oxygen at that point. We didn't actually know her diagnosis then. So we went home with a whole lot of equipment. This is a concentrator, which takes the air in the room and concentrates it down to pure oxygen and gives it back to her. We take portable tanks and a little machine that she's attached to at night to measure her oxygen saturations. And on the way out of the NICU, a nurse said to me, this is not the last curveball Eve's going to throw at you. I'm like, that's a really rude, inappropriate thing to be saying. We are out of here, we spent so long, surely we're just going to wean off this oxygen and our battle will be done, back on track. But no. That wasn't our experience. Since leaving hospital, we've been back 5 times, and one of them was probably the scariest day of my life because Eve went white and floppy and didn't respond well, but now look at her in the ambulance. She recovered and was smiling again. She's crazy. But true warrior style, like I said, battle. But since being home, we've run into some big problems. And it's logistically tricky to have a baby attached to a 15-metre cord. She needs to be on oxygen 24/7. And she's learnt this trick. It's called the grab and pull. And she grabs and pulls her cords all day. And the other tricky thing that we didn't expect was there was a financial burden to buying the air we breathe for her, which we didn't expect as well. And so big problems call for some creative solutions. And in your curriculum, I know because I've written it, there is this criteria. It is amazing. It is called critical and creative thinking. And it's us teaching you guys how to use your brain to solve really complex problems in a creative way. And I know, because I've heard it before, you think, what we learn in school, we don't apply in our real life. But you do, because I did this. And I'll show you how I did this. We solved this problem with some inspiration. And so this is an artwork that we have on our wall at home. I love it because it looks like paint has been poured onto the canvas and swirled, and it looks like the ocean. Some more inspiration was Eve's like geometric prism blocks, which are perfect for colour theory, and the rainbow onesie from 10A. We love this. And also these cool, bright, fun beach houses we like to sit at on the beach near our house. And then I came across this artwork. And so this is an abstract painting by an artist called Barnett Newman. And before I was Miss Doherty, I was Miss Barnett. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. But was actually more interesting was that it sold for a record $43.8 million. I know, we don't understand it either. And like any parent that sees abstract art that they don't understand, they go, my kid could do that. And so that was the plan. We're going to solve this problem by making some baby art and selling it to buy Eve's oxygen. Okay, and so our equation looked like this. This is the problem, and that was meant to be inspiration. Oh my goodness, baby art. Okay, and so what we do is, this is a canvas, it has some paint on it, put it in a Ziploc bag because we want no mess, and Eve swishes, swirls, wax. It's a sensory explosion. She told me she likes blue, and so we do these fun activities. We pull out the prints and I scan them, and we have made some fun digital artwork. And so what is pretty amazing is that creativity could even take hold in such a desperate situation, don't you think? And this quote by Elizabeth Gilbert sums it up really beautifully. It goes like this: art and creativity have always been a conversation between a human being and a mystery that they wanted to connect to, and that mystery is called inspiration, which literally means the in-breath. And I'm super aware of that word breath, but Eve's illness is the mystery, which has become the inspiration, which is literally now funding her breathing. We read stories to Eve, especially in the NICU, and we do it home, and I've come to really love kids' books because you get to the point by like page 2. You don't have to wait around to chapter 47, like this. Where's Mrs. Ladybug? Here she is. The story is so simple, it's done. And so, Eve's story, it's seriously the best book. Eve's story got shared a lot of times. I wrote about it and made a video on a GoFundMe page and put up her artwork online, and it turned up in the Herald Sun, it turned up in our local newspaper, on some parenting blogs, and it got shared on social media nearly 1,000 times. And I think really the reason is because of her big bow. It's so funny to see your bows right now. No, not really. The reason is because the message of her story is really quite simple. And it's this: your life starts with a breath, and it will end in a breath. And in between that time, you are not even aware of the conscious act of breathing that is giving you life. It is something so simple that we take for granted. So breathing in, everyone do it now actually. Everyone take a big breath in. And out. So for Eve, that is a daily effort just to breathe. And so the message is really clear. You need to be grateful for your breaths. You can take deep breaths, and you should, especially right now, during this stressful time for you. You should, because it's good for you. You can, and it's free. But for Eve, it's really hard for her. And it's really hard for a lot of different babies that we met. It's not free. There's a financial cost, and there is a cost to their body and the energy and the effort expenditure it takes just for them to breathe. And so Eve's journey is really medically uncertain. She's very interesting baby to the medical field. She's the only reported baby in the world with this specific sequence of the TBX4 gene. And she's been discussed at conferences in Holland and Houston, and between her consultants in Melbourne, Sydney and Perth. And still, with all these intelligent, wise, knowledgeable, gifted professionals who we trust and love, there is still not a clear solution to her problem. And so this battle of breathing for Eve is really real for us, and it's not a short-term thing. It's not going away anytime soon. And the only choice that we have in this battle is how we want to respond. And it's the same for you. The only choice that you have in your battle, and the thing that you can control, is the way that you respond. And you can make it as complicated or as confusing as you like, because that's really easy to do. It's much harder to make it simpler. And if you choose to do it simply, your reaction will go like this. You can choose to do it with God or without. It's a pretty simple choice to make. You can choose to open your heart and trust. You can choose to live by faith and not by sight. You can choose to smile and be kind throughout it. And you can choose to believe that God will meet you there. And so that's what we choose. We have high expectations that a miracle of healing will happen for Eve, because she needs it to survive. And we choose every day to walk this journey with her, knowing that God's hand is over her the whole time. And I guess so, like today, one of the intentions of me coming to speak to you was to remind you and bring you, I guess, a little more perspective on the gift that you have been given of your breath. And for you to remember that when you are faced with a battle that is bigger and a God-sized battle bigger than you, that you choose to use it as an opportunity to lean into God. And the other reason I'm here is to ask you to actively pray for this baby, because as nice as it is for me to stand up here and share her story with you, my dream for her is for her to stand up here and share it herself, because she has a big story. Stories connect us all, and it's a pretty inspiring story to share. And when she does, I know she's going to tell you about this room in our house. It's called the Mini Monet room. Okay? It's so cool. We do really fun, creative things in this room, but it's also where we sit and we try and figure out how to move forward. And I want to suggest to you that this battle would look a whole lot harder and darker and bleaker had we not invited creativity into the mix. It's been a significant part of this puzzle as a family to help us, and it's a significant part of her medical team to be thinking outside the box on how are we going to work through and solve this problem. And so, as any art teacher would encourage you, I have to say this, that creativity it's important to figure out your life. It is important in solving problems. It's not just about making things look pretty. And therefore, we want to invite you to our Mini Monet room. Eve said she wants to meet everybody. And so we're hosting some Mini Monet art classes throughout December. And it's going to be some pre-Christmas fun if you want a bit of fun on the weekend. And you can find all about that at breatheforeve.com. Now, she does have a website because I told you she's hardcore, and I feel like when you have a baby and they do something in like a 5% capacity, you say they did the whole thing. And so we're making this and she's pressed the space bar like twice, and therefore I feel like she made it. It's breatheforeve.com, and it has actually been a really nice thing to put up all her information, her video, the shop where you can buy some artwork that we've made together for Christmas presents, and also a lot about the Lung Foundation and the Heart Foundation, which is where some other medically complex mums have gone and found community too, which is something that we didn't expect. And so that's where we will be, because we won't be back here for a little while. And just lastly, we want to say a big thank you from our family, and for inviting us here, for sharing our story. It's really nice to be part of a community that is interested in our story and praying and thinking of us. And we are thinking of you guys too. And I wish you all the best in the lead up to the end of the year and your studies and your exams. Thank you.